Hello and welcome to another episode of Metal Effort. My name's Nehemiah, and today we're going to be looking at this piece of metal, the Spyderco Paysan by Peter Rassenti. This knife has been on my radar since I first got into the hobby. Quite excited about this review, put a lot of time and effort into putting this knife through its paces, and I think I have a good estimation of its quality, and we will get a chance to pick it apart here today. First thing we're going to do is our size comparisons. We've got our PM2 and our Para 3 as our classic examples. The Paysan is not a small knife. It's a pretty large knife. The cutting edge is pretty close to 4 inches. It's 3.88 inches. Cutting edge is about 3.7. Definitely over the 3.5 edge that we've got from like the Drunken. The Drunken and the Paysan are kind of back to back. Spyderco's most expensive outings here this year. So really, really interesting review that I did on the Drunken. If you haven't checked that out yet, go ahead and look that up. But the Paysan is our biggest batter yet. This is trumping the cost of the Drunken by over $100 more expensive. So it's really got to earn that price tag, and we'll see if it does in fact do that. I'll do a couple extra size comparisons for you just to give you an idea of the size of it. It's kind of deceptive in how big it is and how small it is in some ways. We've got the Spyderco Spidey Chef. We've got the Trevor Berger LEXK in. I'm excited to review that one here. That's a little sneak peek. What else do I have on the table? Oh, I've got the new Ox Orca. This will be a fun one. I'm trying to get some use in on that. Here's R2D2. Let's get into our measurements. I want to do a actual weigh-in and see exactly what my scale says about the weight of this. There's no internal milling, obviously. This is an integral knife. So, for such a big knife, it's almost 4 inches. It's actually not that bad. It's definitely over the ounce an inch. But again, on big knives, it's hard to achieve that ratio because volume gets bigger as the length of the knife gets bigger. So it's hard to maintain that. So in my opinion, I think this is pretty good weight. So that's got it going for it. One quick note before I jump into the dent here. I have already taken off the Spyderco clip. It's just kind of a classic spoon clip that was on here. I ordered this Lynch clip from GP Knives long before I got the Paysan. I was hunting down exactly this clip. Didn't know exactly what brand or what color scheme I wanted, but I wanted it to match the Paysan. And this extra long Spyderco clip with the sand wash fit the bill perfectly. So really, really, really easy for me to recommend this deep carry. I think it fits the nice aesthetics perfectly, fills the hand. But just from this point onward, know that I'm reviewing it with this clip attached to it. In my opinion, I think this is garbage. Don't have that clip. You want to find a replacement. So I don't think it's really worth reviewing the knife with that clip attached to it, in my opinion. So that's really the only difference from just a normal Paysan. I didn't do too much to it otherwise. Okay, let's get into the dent, the decent, the excellent, the nitpicks, and the terrible of this piece of metal. In the decent, the first thing I want to talk about a little bit more is that weight. This is the thing that surprised me the most. Holding the knife, carrying the knife, it really disappeared in my pocket. It didn't feel like it was a burden to carry in the slightest. Again, having this deep carry pocket clip, I think, helped with that a little bit. It was kind of hitting the bottom of my pocket just barely, so it wasn't completely yanking on the top of my pocket. So I think that might have contributed to my perception of how lightweight this knife is. But overall, I want to give them a shout out for just, titanium integrals tend to be really, really heavy, but just how thin the profile is in both dimensions, it didn't really hit the weight aspect ratio too much. So that's great. Speaking of how it carried in the pocket, it's no flipper tab, obviously. It is just the perfect shape. It snuggles into your pocket really easily. Stuff can get by, nothing snagging on it. It's just a clean, backspacer, back of the knife on an integral. You've got some jimping here, but it's not super aggressive when you're getting your hand in there. It's nothing that's really negative any way. really a dream. I don't think I've ever had a knife this big carry as well. The closest example to that would maybe be the CKF that I've got, the Suhoi, which, is even longer, even larger, but similarly has a nice big old long clip. The knife tapers, and it just makes it really easy to carry these knives. The Paysan is even better than the Suhoi in that regard, and this was the best carried big knife prior to the Paysan. So props there. Really, 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 really like the carrying aspect of the knife. Next, we're going to talk about the ergos. The ergos are good. Kind of a spoiler right now. They're not excellent, but I really just bearing down on the knife, I kind of found the limitations of the ergos. And this is always subjective. I have medium-sized hands, so take it for what it's worth. I initially was kind of choking up on the knife in this grip. This felt a little bit more comfortable to me at first because I have the thumb and the index finger, in that pinch grip right here, which is what I tend to look for. So the jimping is in a place that you kind of want to snuggle up and choke up on the knife all the way up to here. And there is kind of a curve right here in the body of the knife, and it's designed to facilitate that. When you are using it a lot and you're really bearing down, there's not really anything here in between to kind of cushion that finger. So these 2 points right here end up being kind of hot spotty. So for that reason, I can't put it in the excellent. I learned to move my hand down half a finger into this position. My thumb ends up not being quite as high onto the jimping, but this is markedly more comfortable to use it this way. It moves me a little bit further away from the blade, but it's not like awkwardly far away by any means. It kind of like, oh, okay. Long-term use, hard bearing down cuts or anything like that, you're going to want to move down a half step, and then the chamfering here just kind of locks your index finger in, and it feels pretty natural. You got plenty of room on the back. No issues there. And with my particular pocket clip, it's so long, it's skipping all 3 of these fingers, so the tip of this is not poking me anywhere here. It basically ends up in the part of the hand here that's just not really touching anything. It's kind of like in the perfect place to where this fills the hand without jabbing me, which really helps that ergonomics compared to the spoon clip. So I can't recommend enough this particular clip, the extra long lich clip. I think it perfectly fixes the ergonomic snafus on this clip, as well as just being deep carry, longer, and more aesthetically pleasing. This clip was only like $20, so it's not that big of a deal on a $520 knife anyway, in my opinion. So overall, that contributes to a very comfortable knife, but not, blow your mind comfortable just because of this little issue right here. Your mileage might vary depending on your hand size. Speaking of the jimping, I really, really like the jimping. It's quite similar to the drunken. It's a little bit more aggressive than the drunken, but in a good way. It gives you enough of that traction without cutting you or shredding your fingers that otherwise you don't have a lot to hang on to on this knife. The texture of the scales is such that it's not slippery by any means, but you just want a little bit of oomph to push in or pull out. And I think that the jimping is excellent. It's like perfect, right mix of skin grab, glove grab, and something that's not gonna kind of wear itself out quickly in terms of how comfortable it is. So jimping's excellent. Also, jimping on the back of the knife for the reverse grip is basically the same thing, just much wider. This is actually pretty comfortable for the reverse grip. I don't use my knives like this, but I can definitely see why this knife has it in the back here. It really does accommodate the reverse grip really nicely. Not really, at least in my hand, it's not touching me too much right here. Maybe a little bit. I guess it's a little bit of traction, better than nothing, but it's not something that really comes in contact or matters down here in the palm of my hand when I'm opening the knife, but it's there and it's well done. Next thing I like to point out is just how well chamfered the knife is. There's not a single sharp edge on this knife other than the one that should be there. I thought this might be enough kind of craziness going on that there'd be some kind of sharp edge. These are kind of pokey. They're a little bit hot spotty, but they're definitely not sharp. They're very well chamfered. Nothing's going to snag on you really Everything in the like no-fly zone here is good. Very deep chamfers all the way around. Yeah, it's really well done. I thought, again, looking at pictures, I was a little worried about this, but even the corners of these are knocked down a bit, so no issues there. Tai Chung really knocked it out of the park on the fit and finish, with one exception I'll talk about later in the nitpick section. One thing I was surprised by is how easy this was to take apart. For some reason, I just kind of got it in my head that integrals are kind of a pain in the butt to take apart because you don't just get to unscrew the scale and take it off, you know. This actually ended up being very easy to take apart. The pivot is got like a D shape on one side, so I can screw this side out and screw that side out, and the pivot is still holding the blade in, and then I can just push a screw to kind of move the pivot, not a screw, but a hex bit, and just push through the pivot, and it pops out the other side. And then there's the ball bearings. I'll do some pictures. It was really dirty when I took it apart. It doesn't really matter too much, but I will say if you're getting your Paysan, I would open it up, clean it out real quick. It's not going to take you too long to get in there, wipe it clean, lube it up with your favorite lube, and I think you should be good to go. It took me, I don't know, like 5 minutes to take it down, clean it out, put it back together. It was not an issue in the slightest. It's one screw to worry about. It's really, and it's open enough in the back area and stuff that it's not like it's hard to work or clean and, get a Q-tip in there and just get it from all the angles. And it was really, really easy to get it out and get it back in. Yeah. Oops. The last thing I want to talk about in the Decent is the open, close, and disengage section. It's not good enough to make it into the Excellent, and you'll kind of understand why as we go through the OCD. In the open, I was really, really, really worried about the whole detent situation. This was the thing that kind of everybody is really worried about because, it's an expensive knife and you don't want to buy a knife and it just have a wet noodle detent. So I have good news and I have bad news. The good news is that the detent is actually quite snappy, at least on my particular example, in the opening. As far as how it feels to, pop the detent and open the knife, very, very, very good and kinetic. I think even better than the detent on my particular Spidey Chef. I will say the detent on this was a little bit weak compared to most. I know that Nick Shabazz's version of it, after he handled mine, he's like, your detent's a little bit weaker than mine. So mileage may vary on both of these knives, but very happy with the detent on this knife. It perfectly functions both for the Spidey flick and for the slow roll open. You don't have an issue on either of those. Bad news is because this giant blade is super long, really thick blade stock on the spine of it, it's very easy to pop it open with, a little bit of whiplash out of the handle. So sometimes your knife being able to do that just means you have a wet noodle detent. In this case, I don't think that that's really what's happening here. It's just leverage, the length of the blade, the weight of the blade. It would be ridiculously tight detent in order to hold the blade in and not do that, to the point where I don't think it would be really all that fun to open the knife. It would be far too over in the wrong direction of just awkwardly hard detent. So I think they did what they had to do, and I think they did the right thing. Dial the detent in for the action, and if the blade falls out, the blade falls out. That is going to affect some people that have like the gravity laws or whatever. I don't know how many places have that you have knife hobby people going on, but you know what you're getting into now. As long as the detent, from what I'm hearing, in the pass around group, I kind of put out a feeler and be like, hey, anybody got the Paysan yet? Anybody, what's your detent situation? And it sounds like people are pretty much falling in the same place that I am, where it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, but the blade is very easy to whip out if you do that. So there you go. On the disengage, now I have mixed feelings on the disengage aspect of the knife. So I didn't have the Nirvana, which was Spyderco's first collaboration with Peter Rassenti. And that knife had a lot of hype in it. From what I could tell from the zeitgeist, the attitude of people, it was kind of a letdown for a lot of people. There wasn't a steel insert, and there were some lock stick issues and detent issues, blah, 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 blah. So, again, I have good news and I have bad news. Good news is, I don't think it's as bad as the Nirvana from what I've heard. I have not personally handled a Nirvana. The steel insert is very well done as far as, where it is, how it looks, how it feels. It doesn't have lock stick in the same way that titanium lock bars on steel have lock stick. It's a different kind of lock stick, and to kind of see this, we're gonna have to zoom in a little bit. Now, right here, you can see a very wide open detent ramp. It's very obviously heavily, machined out there, a detent ball ramp. Now, what happened was the top of the lock face here, they wanted to have it completely squared off. So there's like a little chink of metal right there at the tip of my finger that kind of comes back out from the detent ball ramp. And what that does is it kind of pins down. You can see right there, it kind of flares up. So it's not a uniform incline on the tang of the blade like you would normally see. It's got, like, here's the drunken, and it's a very, come on, focus. It's a very even incline as you see the lock bar kind of move over. But if you look very closely, it's more something you feel than you could see, but you can barely see it right here, that the edge of that is actually further out than where the lock actually sits on the tang of the blade. And so it has this kind of like clicking feel to it. And so it's, I guess, technically lock stick because it's not extremely smooth to move that over, from like a technical standpoint. But it's not like the steel is really, grinding together. It's not like, grinding teeth or something. I don't think there's anything you can do to really smooth that out per se, because it's almost clicking in, kind of riding in over that little hump and then sitting in the groove that's about 30% in. And so I don't know. I have, again, mixed feelings. I kind of like that it kind of clicks into place, but it does mean I need to push a little bit harder than I'm used to on a really smooth disengaging knife to pop it back out. So, if it was gritty, I would be pretty upset. This isn't gritty. It's smooth, but it's just kind of got a click in, click out feel. I don't know, is this just on mine? Is it just kind of an anomaly where the lock face didn't end up being like a smooth, incline? Or is it kind of just designed that way so that you don't have any lock rock or something because that detent ball ramp is too close to the edge of the tang of the blade at the top? I don't know. So, if you got a Paysan, kind of chime in. Tell me, is the same thing going on here that I've got happening on yours? I'm interested to know. It's not ruining the experience because it is quick and easy to disengage, but there's just that little pop. One thing I'll mention here, normally I'd put this in the nitpicks, but I'll just mention it now because it's so tied into the disengage aspect. I wish this part right here was milled out a little bit deeper so that I can come in horizontally. I feel like this little swoop right here is kind of blocking me from where I want to get in. I have to come in vertically instead of horizontally to get into that lock bar. And it's a little bit pointy right here because I do want to get up toward the top to make it a little bit easier with the leverage to pop the lock bar out of the engagement. But, back here, I have more room here to push the lock, but then that lock stick annoys me a little bit more. So I feel like I'm not really able to get exactly where I want. Sometimes you can find the sweet spot on the knife and it not bother you, but it's good. It's just not great by any means. All right, so all that out of the way, what's the close like? The smooth transition with that detent ball ramp is good. It still has kind of a bit of a hop that it sits pretty far down. Some knives, they would already be on the tang of the blade right here at this angle, but it's pretty far down, and it doesn't bounce per se. It almost does though. It's pretty smooth. It's just that lock bar, and it's pretty easy when you're holding the knife. to wiggle it shut to kind of pin the lock bar down, which makes it harder to get up onto the detent ball ramp. So I've kind of learned to put my finger precisely there so that when I disengage and I go like this, it much smoother transition onto the detent ball going onto the tang of the blade if I'm not pinching down the lock bar. So if you're having some really bad bouncing issues like this, you're probably pinning down the lock bar. So you move that, and then it pretty much closes one jostle. It's very smooth. This is running on stainless steel bearings. Very, very, very smooth. I mean, of the three, the OCD, I think the opening is the most satisfactory aspect of the three. And disengage is okay, close is good. So overall, I think that amounts to decent. I have been fidgeting with the knife a lot. That is definitely something that I enjoy about the knife. So ultimately, it's a good experience. Okay, let's talk about the excellent. First thing I want to talk about is this integral handle. So I've not had an integral before. I've reviewed the Riot Jack that was integral. Many times I've almost purchased a Benchmade Anthem, and I always talk myself out of it, kind of because it's integral. I like the idea of it. I didn't like the idea of the weight and the hard to service aspect of it. This knife is kind of satiated both of my fears. It's pretty lightweight, like we've mentioned, and it's easy to take apart. And so now we get to focus on just the benefits of an integral. Back to like, things like the Chamois that I reviewed. That is just amazingly simple, and the entire knife is just better because of it. Especially with this clip. I feel like this clip just matches everything about the knife that, this stupid thing doesn't. So ultimately, I think to have an integral this well made, the machining it takes to machine out all this and get, the lock bar done right, get everything, the pivots, lined up correctly. You boo-boo it up, you got to get another brick of titanium and start all over. So there's something to be said of just like the mastery of machining a single block of titanium together that is elegant, beautiful, and just, respected, I guess, in the knife industry when people can pull this off. Percentage-wise, integrals are, I would guess, somewhere below 5%. It's probably a lot less, like 2 or 3. If I had some raw numbers, I'd be interested to find out what they are. But very rare to be pulled off well. Peter Rassenti on his customs is really the top of the list of, really good designers that pull it off. So for Spyderco to take this collaboration on and really just flex their muscles on, achieving something that would be so difficult to do, I'm extremely impressed. They did a very, very, very good job with the integral handle, and I think that's probably the biggest calling card of this knife, the thing that makes it unique. Second excellent thing is this smeared stonewash blade. It's not near mirror, polished stonewash blade. This is extremely similar to the Drunken. They're both S90V. They both have the exact same finish. Hides scratches really well. Plays with the light really well. It's beautiful. I love it. This is probably one of my favorite finishes behind the kind of bead blasted, polished thing that's going on here. Sheregorov's to some extent, but really this is my favorite finish. These are my second favorite finishes. So really, really, really well done. Just as good on the Paysan as it was on the Drunken. Very, very similar on those two knives. Next thing that's excellent is the cutting ability. This really is the biggest thing that surprised me about the knife. Looking at the thickness, this is a 4mm knife stock. Traditionally that's pretty thick, and so what I'm going to be very careful in explaining what kind of cutting performance you're going to have on this. I sharpened this aftermarket. It was laser sharp beforehand, but you can do curves, you can do S curves in this sucker. The geometry of the blade is way more conducive to nice cutting than I thought it was going to be. It's a saber grind. But when you compare it to like a normal size knife, that the height of the grind is not that far off from like a full flat grind on a normal size knife. You know, this is a 3.3 inch Trevor Burger LEXK, and it doesn't seem that different in cutting performance than this. Obviously, when you're slicing, you're going to have issues because it is going to run into, you know, this giant wedge at the top, and it's gonna stop itself in cheese, you know, once it gets to the end of that saber grind. But the initial cutting through paper, making any, you know, pretty deep cuts. I mean, you're talking, I don't know, almost, 0.75 inches of like depth, and it's gonna be really, really, really good cutting experience. I was blown away with just how much I enjoyed cutting with this knife. I thought it would be kind of blunt, you know, not the edge, but just kind of like it cuts, but it's more, you know, showboaty. No, this is a fantastic cutting tool. As far as the steel goes, S90V, awesome premium steel. Edge retention a little bit better than M390. Toughness would be a little bit lower. Corrosion resistance be about the same. So for a pocket knife, I think it's just as good, if in most cases probably better than M390, because you probably would favor edge retention over toughness anyway. You're not going to be batoning with this. So blade steel, blade finish, cutting performance, all excellent. Very, very good. Next thing is just the general design. I've kind of alluded to this, but I want to keep harping on it. I talked about it in my last video in my 5 things I wish I could have told myself when I first started the knife hobby. Rolls right off the tongue. The ability to remove things from a knife and make the knife better is really what good design is. You know, you favor function over form, but you're not ignoring form. If you can be very efficient with your decisions. And in art and design, both are just a series of decisions. And this design, similar to the Shamwaris, even the LEXKs to some extent, the Trevor Burger guys, you know, being able to take away a flipper tab that's kind of in the way in your pocket, kind of looks weird. It's in your way ergonomically. If you can remove that and still maintain the ability to quickly deploy your knife, that makes the knife better, in my opinion, obviously. But that's good design. You look at like the classic, you know, Apple products that have redefined a genre of products. Usually what they're doing is finding a way to make something better by removing things. And you point at some stuff and you're like, I miss that thing, but you take it away, you do it the right way, and it's like, oh, but I don't care. The new thing is better. I'm really glad that they didn't have the lanyard hole on the side of the knife. It's on the back, and so it's, you know, kind of removed as far as the aesthetic of it, and you're not compromising the position of your clip whatsoever with that hole there. So all the negatives that I normally have with a lanyard hole are taken away. But for people that want it, it's still there. That's a good design choice. The fact that you only got one set of screws, really, not counting the clip, the idea of an integral is less is more. And so all of that, you know, no flipper tab, no thumb studs, the whole idea of the spider hole is exemplifying exactly what I'm talking about in design, that less is more. By removing something from the knife, I make it ambidextrous. I make it have the ability to open in multiple different ways that are all just as good as a thumb stud, just as good as a flipper tab. And I don't have all these peripherals hanging off of my knife. This is the epitome of great knife design. Excellent. Next excellent thing I want to talk about, and this is going to really rattle some cages. I'm going to take an unpopular position on this. I think the price is excellent. And before you vomit and poop your pants and get your panties in a twist, hear me out. Here's the deal. If you're gonna get on the books for Peter Rassenti, which good luck doing that, and you get a knife from him, you order a Paysan from Peter Rassenti himself, you're gonna be paying $1,500, $2,000. Like, those are not cheap knives. Forget that you're gonna have to wait 6 months or whatever it is. Like, this knife is 97% that knife, but for a third the cost. A third. So Yes, if you're watching a YouTube video reviewing a sports car, right? And there's a new collaboration and they bring out a Bugatti Veyron for a third the price. That's 97% the original. That is a good value. That is a good price. Is it objectively expensive? Of course. Of course. There's a selection effect. If you're watching this video, you know what the name of the knife is. So I don't want to hear how you think this is too expensive because it has a crappy clip. You shouldn't buy it. If you get a Bugatti for a third the price and it's got hubcaps on it, are you going to let that stop you from buying it if you're already in the market for a supercar? No, you're not. That's perfectly fine. You go happily drive that car off the lot, drive straight to the wheel store and buy some nice rims. That's not a problem. That is not a problem in the slightest. So don't fake yourself into saying the reason you're buying this is because it has a bad clip, or the reason you're not buying it is because it has a bad clip. That's baloney. The reason you're not buying it is because you wouldn't have bought it anyway. And if you are interested, go find a good clip. You will be happy as a lark. So the price is excellent. Not decent, excellent. I will take that to my grave. This knife is not perfect. I'm going to talk about the nitpicks before you think I'm a hack fanboy. First thing I want to talk about is this particular version, or this particular specimen, is not perfectly centered. This was a little bit disheartening to me. It's not like atrocious by any means, and it's definitely not close on this side from like scratching the blade. You know, it looks like it's maybe 54%. I can kind of live with this. This is okay. You know, if I look at it in the right light, like right there, hey, it's centered. I know it's not, but it's so barely almost. And to be honest, I love this knife so much. I kind of just want to use that as an excuse to make this like a beater user knife. I'm crazy. But that's a bummer. I don't think this is happening to a lot of people. I haven't heard anybody really talk about this, but mine is not perfectly centered, so that's kind of a bummer. Next nitpick is the size of the knife. Now, this is totally subjective. If you're interested in big knives, it's not going to be a problem or a nitpick at all for you. But this is over the 3.5 inches, and I feel like that any knife that's bigger than that, I always just want to remind you just how gigantic this knife is. That's the biggest defining difference, in my opinion, between the Drunken and the Paysan. If you're looking for, expensive knife, both are very EDCable, surprisingly so in the Paysan. But really just comes down to blade length. If you have legal laws where you can't be over 3.5, this is really going to bum you out. So kind of you'll be able to figure out which knife you want based on the size of it. This is not, a small knife in the slightest. Next nitpick, I did put a mirror edge on this knife. This side was really well done. It was very even. This side, and I could have fixed this. I could have reprofiled it, but I kind of wanted to point it out here in the review. And then, once I do dull the knife, then I'll probably take the time to make sure everything's, reprofiled and edged out. But the butt of the knife right here, to the apex, I got it sharp. But the grind line was definitely uneven over here and a little bit on the front here, where on this side it was pretty much perfect all the way across. So, your mileage may vary. This is something I think I have found, at least on small levels, on every single knife, except for the Drunken, even the Drunken. But, the tail end of the knife, it's always tough. But this one was even, at least on both sides. This one being asymmetrical is a little annoying, but again, I can reprofile that. I can fix that. And then the last nitpick is the price. So it's not that this is too expensive, but the nitpick is I know for the next 6 months, people are going to be complaining about how expensive both the Paysan and the Spyderco is, or the Drunken rather is. And just the last kind of word, guys, if these are outside of your budget for whatever reason, that's fine. You can think that in your head. You don't need to try to convince other people that it's too expensive just to make yourself feel better about you not buying it for whatever reason. Things are worth what people are willing to pay for them. These are excellently made they are fantastic for how much Spyderco is charging them. Are they way more expensive than your average Spyderco? Of course, yes. This is like, a beater EDC, whatever knife. It G10 and stainless steel, like, this is not premium materials on the handle. The blades are, whatever. But this is, less than half the cost of the Drunken, a third of the cost of this. But it's all relative because the Paysan is a third of the price of a custom Peter Rassenti. So don't forget, it's not just the brand that you're really judging the price on, it's the whole package. And as a reviewer, I can't stress this enough. Do not judge an entire company over the merits of a single knife and what it does and how much it costs. That if it's an amazing knife at an amazing price, regardless of what country it was made in or what company made it, it does not matter. And so don't let that make you like a meanie head on the internet. Last thing I have to talk about, and I do have something terrible, and it's the obvious thing I mentioned at the beginning. That's the clip. This clip is a joke. Now, I guess it's a step in the right direction compared to the Drunken. So here's Spyderco's issue, that they need to do some soul searching and figure this crap out. So on this one, you have a custom clip. Aesthetically, it looks fine. I don't like that it's shallow carry, but it looks good. It matches the aesthetic, the flow of the knife. It's anodized, the right color, whatever. This was just not bent the correct way. It was super pinch tight here. This was pointed up, pokey. I rebent this so it was, manageable. Fix that. There's, except for a few third-party people out there making customized clips, this is kind of worse than the spoon clip in some ways, simply because you can't run out and buy like a generic third-party clip and just slap it on there. So, but it's offset by the fact that it's pretty easy to just bend into the right shape. There's nothing you can do to this clip to make it good. I know that people like this. It's a functional clip. It pins a knife into your pocket. But how absurdly shallow it is drives me up a wall. I hate this stupid logo. It's not stonewashed like the blade is exactly. So it's just like an eyesore. It's just the hubcap on my Bugatti. I don't like it. On the positive side here, at least you can put a standard Spyderco clip on there. So I think, if I'm judging these two terrible clips from two very expensive Spydercos, I think I prefer the terrible solution of the Paysan, because that's $20, but it perfectly matches. This is just the clip that it should have shipped with. It's perfect in every way. I love it. Where this is always going to be kind of substandard, just passable C+ clip. I can't really do anything about this. So overall, if I'm already investing $400 or $500 into a knife, I want to have the option of fixing it, even if I just throw $20 at it to fix the problem. I understand the argument, for that price, it should be a 10. I get it. I understand. But if something is amazing and there's something very easily fixable for $20, percentage-wise, that's a small thing. Shouldn't let that keep you away from it, in my opinion. All right, so let's get into our conclusion, and we'll wrap this sucker up. My conclusion is this. I was ready to be tremendously disappointed by this knife. There was plenty of hype. I was very excited about it. Thinking about knives, you daydream about what knife you wish you could buy. There was always two that would kind of bubble into my head. It's finally getting a Spectre from the Holtz. At least I got one to review, so I kind of satiated my desire for a little bit. But I think I had more daydreams about the Paysan than any other knife. So there is definitely, I should acknowledge, I really, really, really was hopeful that this knife was going to be awesome. Getting the Paysan into some of those early hands, from like the collector group or whatever, and hearing about a bad detent and people not really being all that excited and not really hearing much at all. I felt like people aren't really talking about the knife, even though there are a lot of people with them out there right now. And so I had to find out one way or another, is this knife good? and I was bracing myself for the worst, because if it was a wet noodle detent, that is a hard pass for me. That is a deal breaker for sure. Turned out the detent's awesome, and it doesn't negatively affect the action whatsoever. There's definitely some quibbles that I have. Once I fix that bevel edge, the geometry on the regrind, I think this knife will essentially be my perfect knife. The centering thing is like the smallest thing, that's the freckle on the supermodel, I guess. I don't even mind. Again, it kind of gives me license to just not care too much and then not enjoy the knife. It's weird psychology, but ultimately, if you're the type of knife person that is willing to spend good money for a knife. You could say that $500 is more than you're ever going to spend, but if you have the budget and you let hedonic adaptation take over, eventually you'll be buying much more expensive knives. This is $800. I am equally happy with both knives. So to have something this amazing, just free and open to the masses, that's awesome. To just kind of have something I can always recommend, that's not hard to get, that is as good as a $1,500 custom. There's not that many knives in the community that can really fit that bill. There's just not. So this is extremely unique in that sense. If you are in the hunt for something this expensive, I think it's worth giving it a go. Buy it from a reputable retailer. If you're really upset by, bad centering or, really bad botched grind or something like that, return it. Don't mess around. Don't do anything. Keep the crappy clip on. Send it back. Get another one. I picked this up on the secondary market because I wanted to get it as quick as possible, so I don't have that luxury. I probably would have sent it in if I did buy it from a reputable place, but I also got the knife a lot sooner because I had to figure out if it was good or not. It's a gem. This is totally a gem. This is awesome. I highly recommend it. Obviously, it's not for everybody. Knife's big. Knife's expensive. That's going to eliminate a lot of people. But for everybody else that's left, you're going to love this knife. I hope this was helpful to you. And I don't beg for subscribers, but I'm looking at the numbers and I see a lot of people watching my reviews that are not subscribed. Most of my viewers, like 3 times the number, are not subscribed. So if you're enjoying this content, I've been around for eight or so months. Give me a sub. I think I'm finally proud enough with my work that I'm willing to kind of push myself out there just a little bit so that people can see the knives that I'm reviewing. I do try to find stuff that's new and interesting, as well as review the big ones that we all know about. So give me a like, give me a sub recommendation to somebody you know, but more importantly, sound off in the comments. One thing I've been really encouraged by is just how positive everybody's been in the comments section. A lot of people on there. We're having really good, respectful conversations. Join in. We're happy to have you on the team fun. Team fun. That's dumb. That doesn't make sense. But just comment. Be cool. Bye.